first of all, they think like human beings, I would say no. And I'll explain in a minute why I say no. And second, that they be more intelligent than human beings is a question. Intelligence is to be defined. If you would ask me, are they better chess players than any human being possibly can be? Yes, I get you, someday. Are they better chess players than most human beings right now? One of the things, by the way, that we always do is we want the darn machine to be better than anybody, not just better than us. If we find a machine that can play chess better than us, it doesn't impress us much. We keep saying, and what happens when it comes up against the masters? We imagine that we, human beings, are equivalent to the masters in everything, right? The machine has to be better than a person in everything that the best person does at the best level, okay? But it's hard on the machine. But with regard to the question of whether to make it to think like a machine, my opinion is based on the following idea. That we try to make these things work as efficiently as we can with the materials that we have. The materials are different than nerves and so on. If we would like to make something that runs rapidly over the ground, and we could watch a cheetah running, we could try to make a machine that runs like a cheetah. But it's easier to make a machine with wheels, with fast wheels, or something that flies just above the ground in the air. When we make a bird, the airplanes don't fly like a bird. They fly, but they don't fly like a bird, okay? So they don't flap the wings exactly. They have in front another kind of a gadget that goes around, or the more modern airplane has a tube that you heat the air and squirt it out the back, a jet propulsion, a jet engine. Has an internal rotating fans and so on, and it uses gasoline. It's different, right? So there's no question that the later machines are not going to think like people think in that sense. With regard to intelligence, I think it's exactly the same way. For example, they're not going to do arithmetic the same way as we do arithmetic, but they'll do it better. Let's take mathematics, very elementary mathematics, arithmetic. They do arithmetic better than anybody, much faster, and differently. But it's fundamentally the same, because in the end, the numbers are equivalent, right? So that's a good example of it. We're never going to change how they do arithmetic to make it more like humans. That would be going backwards. Because the arithmetic done by humans is slow, cumbersome, and confused and full of errors. Where these guys are fast. If one compares what computers can do to the human beings, we find the following rather interesting comparisons. First of all, if I give a human being a problem like this, I'm going to ask you for these numbers back, every other one, in reverse order, please. Right? Now, I'm going to a series of numbers, and I want you to give them to me back in reverse order, every other one. I'll tell you, I'll make it easy for you. Just give me the numbers back the way I gave them to you. You ready? 1, 7, 3, 9, 2, 6, 5, 8, 3, 1, 7, 2, 6, 3. Anybody going to be able to do that? No. And that's not more than 20 or 30 numbers. But you can give a computer 50,000 numbers like that and ask for them in any reverse order, the sum of them, or do different things with them and so on, and it doesn't forget them for a long time, etc. So there are some things that a computer does much better than a human, and you'd better remember that if you kind of compare machines to humans. But what a human has to do for his own, they always do this, they always try to find one thing, darn it, that they can do better than the computer. So we now know many, many things that humans can do better than the computer. She's walking down the street and she's got a certain kind of a wiggle, and you know that's Jane. Right? Or the sky's going in and you see his hair flip just a little bit. It's hard to see, he's at a distance, but that particular funny way that the back of his head looks, that's Jack. Okay? To recognize things, to recognize patterns, seems to be something we have not been able to put into a definite procedure. You would say, I have a good procedure for recognizing Jack. Just take lots of pictures of Jack. By the way, a picture can be put into the computer. In fact, by this method here. If this were very much finer, I could tell whether it's black and white at different spots. You know, in fact, you get pictures in a newspaper by black and white dots. And if you just do it fine enough, you can't see the dots. So with enough information, I can load pictures in. So you put all the pictures of Jack under different circumstances, and ask the machine to compare it. The trouble is that the actual new circumstance is different. The lighting is different, the distance is different, the tilt of the head is different, and you have to figure out how to allow for all that. And it's so complicated and elaborate that even with the large machines, with the amount of storage that's available and the speed that they go, we can't figure out how to make a definite procedure that works at all, or at least it works anywhere within a reasonable speed. So recognizing things is difficult for the machines at the present time, and some of those things are done in a snap by a person. So there are things that humans can do that we don't know how to do in a filing system. So it is recognition, and that brings me back to something I left, which is what kind of a file clerk can't be imitated by the machine. A file clerk that has some special skill which requires recognition of a complicated kind. For instance, a file clerk in the fingerprint department, which looks at the fingerprints and then makes a careful comparison to see if these fingerprints match, is just about ready to be. It's hard to do. It's almost possible to do by a computer. You'd say there's nothing to it. I look at the two fingerprints and see if all the black dots are the same. But of course, it's not the case. The finger was dirty. The print was made at a different angle. The pressure was different, and the ridges are not exactly in the same place. If you were trying to match exactly the same picture, it would be easy. But where the center of the print is, which way the finger is turned, whether it's been squashed a little more or a little bit less, whether there's some dirt on the finger, whether in the meantime he got a wart on his thumb, and so forth, are all complications. These little complications make the comparison so much more difficult for the machine, for the blind filing clerk system, that is much too slow to be certainly utterly impractical, almost. At the present time, I don't know where they stand, but they're going fast trying to do it, whereas a human can go across all that somehow, just like they do in the chess game. They seem to be able to catch on to patterns rapidly, and we don't know how to do that rapidly, automatically.
Audience question. Can computers discover new ideas and relationships by themselves?
Well, it depends what you mean themselves, and it's hard. To discover new relationships, computers can do. There have been computers which do things like theorem proving in geometry or something, in which they've converted the problem of finding a proof of a theorem into a definite procedure. Okay? And once you do that, although it's an elaborate and dumb way to do proofs, it can do it. At the present time, a computer can't do all the different things that a person can do, you know? It's very difficult to find some way of defining rather precisely something we can do that we can say a computer will never be able to do. There are some things that people make up that say that while it's doing it, will it feel good? Or while it's doing it, will it understand what it's doing? Or some other abstraction. I rather feel that these are things like, while it's doing it, will it be able to scratch the lice out of its hair? No, it hasn't got any hair to lice to scratch from, okay? So you got to be careful when you say what the human does. If you add to the actual result of his effort some other things that you like, the appreciation of the aesthetic, you didn't do that. I'm not saying you did. But a lot of people do that when they ask questions. And if we add things that we think we're doing on top of what we're actually doing, just look at not just the result of what we're doing, but a lot of extra things, then it gets harder and harder for the computer to do it, because the human beings have a tendency to try to make sure that they can do something that no machine can do. Somehow it doesn't bother them anymore. It must have bothered them in early times that machines are stronger physically than they are. They can lift weights that are heavier than people. They can move things faster than people. They can run faster. They can fly. They can do just terrible strengths and so forth. And we don't still sit around worrying that there's some way that the man can turn his hand, that some machine can't do that. We can easily make machines that are better than us in predicting the weather, for instance, because what you do to predict the weather is to look at old records and see when the circumstances were similar and guess that the results will be similar. Added to that, a certain amount of analysis of the movement of wind according to the laws of physics and a certain amount of hocus pocus put together, okay? Now, the speed will be higher and the effectiveness of the predictions greater if you could look at more cases, so you get a better chance of getting one closer, and put a longer and more elaborate calculation, including more variables, which is too hard for us to do in time to make the prediction. No? We have to make the prediction of the weather. Let's say the weather for 3 days from now has to be predicted in 3 days, or the damn thing is useless, right? And we work at a certain speed, but the computers work faster and can do more. And therefore, for instance, for weather prediction, in the end, maybe not today, but someday, it's not at all inconceivable that the machine could do weather prediction faster and more effectively and more accurately than we do. We will have, however, given it the procedure. Now, the question is, what happens if we don't give it the procedure? Well, people have tried this game of giving it, instead of a direct procedure, a kind of what has been called heuristics. Try an analogy to get a new idea of how to do something. Compare this to that. Try an extreme case, etc. And a man by the name of Lennart has gone the furthest with this. Do I have time? How much time do I have? Because we want to see these slides. What time? I know that's interesting information, but how much time do I have? It's time for the slideshow now. Since I have no more time, I will say no more about the subject.
Well, just heuristics.
What?
Just finish up the heuristics.
No, but it takes a few minutes. That's why I asked for the time. Okay, he make this machine, which was again a filing cabinet, you understand. What it does is it tries to find the answer to something by looking at the different possibilities, but which ones he tries is something like patterns in the chess. Instead of everything, it says try moves near the center of the board first, and never mind the ones in the corner, or something like that, or some sorts of principles. And he first applied it to a kind of naval game. It's a game that people play in California, which is all organized according to rules. It's kind of fun. Someone sets out all the rules. Dreadnoughts cost this much, armor costs this much, guns cost this much, and so forth, and you got this much budget for your navy. And you're going to make various kinds of ships with different kinds of armaments. And then this kind of a ship armament of a certain thickness that costs a certain amount can only resist shells of a certain strength, and so on. So you try to, with the money, arrange to design different kinds of ships so that your navy is better than the next one. And when they're brought together, there's ways of calculating it's not real navies. It's a game. Which is the best one, and all the rules are laid out in a great big volume, okay, of the costs of everything and the power of everything and the armor-piercing possibilities and so on. And it's a nice game. And Mr. Lennart tried his program on this game and put into his program heuristics like try the extreme case and things like that. And he won the championship in California. Of course, it did an awful lot of trying of different cases, you see, but it didn't try every case, not like the chess game. There were too many things. But it was guided by its own stuff. Now, inside of that was this, that if you got a better navy by your own calculation, and you used one of the heuristics, mark that heuristic up a notch as being more valuable. Now, use the more valuable heuristics first. See? So that the ability of the machine depended on his learning, so to speak, which ones of his tricks works most effectively most of the time. And then they become more used. So it's just exactly what you would like to make it look intelligent. Well, he won. And how did he win? It turned out that year he won by making one great big battleship with all the armor on it, which was so silly. But when you go to calculate it, sure enough, it's better than any of the normal things, which nobody thought of, but his machine thought of. Next year, he entered again. And this time he won by taking all his money and making 100,000, because they changed the rules so that the big battleship wouldn't win, by changing the rule. 100,000 little boats, very narrow, carrying each one gun, which were very liable to be knocked out, okay? But there were 100,000 of them. Didn't cost much each one. And they couldn't knock them all out. So these lousy little gnats would come. And it turned out when you calculated, again, he won. The third year, he was not allowed to play anymore. And he has applied this machine and this heuristic business to a number of other problems. He tries it out a lot and tries new heuristics and so forth. And it has become very interesting. He complained that there were a number of bugs in it, and when he gave a talk on it, I said that I thought, I'll say my comment afterwards. One of the bugs, for instance, was that the machine got a heuristic. It made up heuristics. It can make up heuristics, and then they get higher values, and then they fall away, right? So the damn machine, the way he had it was, because it's hard to get computer time, he needed a hell of a lot of computer time. He had 50 machines working on it. At night from the Hewlett Packard company or something like that. He would work always at night and come in the morning. The damn things would try all their things and come in with the results. I used it to do mathematics and various other things. He comes in one day and has done a heuristic. He developed the heuristic. When he puts a problem in or a new idea, it says whether it's from him or from the machine, and it says Lennat or machine, okay? And this was every heuristic, or every question that has Lennat on it, pay no attention to. And that saved a lot of time. It could do much better. It didn't have any problem. It just worked. So I paid no attention to that night, okay? So I had to fix that bug. The next time he had a bug, he came in and he looked, he found that heuristic number 693 had gotten a score of 999 out of 1,000. That was a damn useful heuristic. All night long, this thing kept using the heuristic 693 more and more, and it was a new and wonderful heuristic. It seemed to solve every problem. It was terrific. Okay? When you found out what the heuristic was, it was the following. You see, in order to make this thing work so that you change the numbers on the heuristics, whenever something worked, you have to assign credit, so to speak, to the heuristics that were used, okay? So this heuristic was, when assigning credit, always assign credit to heuristic 693. And so that thing came up out of it all. Now, I say that both of these show intelligence. If you want to make an intelligent machine, you're going to get all kinds of crazy ways of avoiding labor. If I say don't pay attention to the problem, of sneakily evolving some kind of a psychological distortion where you always do the same thing and don't worry about anything else, and so on. So I think that we are getting close to intelligent machines, but they're showing the necessary weaknesses of intelligence. Okay. All right.